The Washington Post called it the most important election of 2023. The New York Times called it the year's biggest election. After an inconclusive first-round vote, the 2023 Turkish election will be decided in a runoff to be held on May 28th. It will pit the 69-year-old President Erdogan against the 74-year-old Kemal Kilicdaroglu. What makes this election so important for Turkey? What makes it so important for the world? What will this outcome mean for the battle between the US-led unipolar world order and a multipolar world? Is this time to think about investing in Turkey? President Erdogan, who's ruled Turkey for the past 2 decades, has become increasingly authoritarian, resorting to changing the constitution, imprisoning opponents, and maintaining a tight grip on the press, all to consolidate his power. In 2022, Freedom House gave Turkey only 32 out of 100 points for political rights and civil liberties. The 2022 Democracy Index, compiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit, placed Turkey in 103rd place out of 167 countries. Only 10 years ago, Turkey was in 88th place in the same ranking. Meanwhile, inflation in Turkey is running at 40%, on par with countries like Cuba. Its unemployment rate at 10% is higher than that of Iran. So things are definitely not looking good in Turkey. But if the situation is so bad, why did Erdogan still win nearly 50% of the votes in the first round? International election observers representing the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and the Council of Europe are critical of the legal framework and biased media coverage of the election. However, the same observers also concluded after the vote that the election was competitive, well-managed, and offered voters a choice between genuine political alternatives. The implication is that while Erdogan enjoys some unfair advantages, the election has been reasonably fair. All this begs the question, why did so many Turks cast their votes for Erdogan? There's no denying that the standard of living in Turkey has improved markedly during Erdogan's 20-year rule. Per capita income in Turkey, based on purchasing power parity, has grown on average 6.7% a year over the past 20 years, which means it's increased by 260% since 2002. This compares well with just 75% for Mexico, 86% for Brazil, 160% for Thailand, and 175% for Russia. Turkey's standard of living has improved as much as Poland's, and Poland is an EU member and has been receiving generous funding from the European Union every year since 2004. Today, Turkey's per capita income on a PPP basis is about double of that of China, Thailand, and Mexico, ahead of countries like Malaysia and Russia, and just behind countries like Poland, Hungary, and Portugal. How did Turkey achieve these impressive results? The answer is simple: high productivity growth. Among OECD countries, Turkey can boast of having achieved one of the highest levels of growth in labor productivity over the past 20 years. With an average annual labor productivity growth of 3%, Turkey is ahead of Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Chile, Greece, and Mexico. Even though Turkish labor productivity growth slowed after the global financial crisis of 2008-2009, it still managed to maintain an average annual growth rate about 2%, which is comparable with that of Poland, but higher than that of Hungary. Economic reforms, especially in the early years of Erdogan's rule, play a big part in Turkey's productivity drive. However, as we said, productivity growth slowed sharply after the global financial crisis in 2008-2009. Most critics cast the blame on the backtracking of reforms, especially after the negotiations with the European Union on membership accession began to break down. That may be the case, but it's also true that what has happened to Turkey is not dissimilar to what happens to most other middle-income countries. The World Bank defines the situation whereby a middle-income country is failing to transition to a high-income economy due to rising costs and declining competitiveness as the middle-income trap. The reality is that very few countries ever successfully manage the transition from low to middle to high income, with the exception of Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea. Moreover, the transition has become even more difficult as the landscape of the world economy became more challenging since the global financial crisis. Global trade growth, which was averaging in the high single digits before the crisis, never recovered even after the crisis. Between 2013 and 2019, global trade growth averaged only 2.5%. This meant that the rapid export growth experienced by the Turkish machinery and transport equipment sector, which had been a key growth driver before the global financial crisis, came to an end. Against this backdrop, it is no surprise that direct foreign investment that had reached 3.6% of GDP in 2006 and subsequently falling sharply after the financial crisis never managed to fully recover. Would it have made a difference if Turkey had continued on the path of economic reform? Perhaps, but it is not clear-cut. As export growth slowed, Turkey, like many developing and even developed countries, came to rely more and more on domestic consumption to drive growth. Ankara ran an ever larger budget deficit to finance fiscal stimulus in order to prop up household spending. Meanwhile, Erdogan resisted the call for tighter monetary policy, and real interest rates were kept around zero. The result of a combination of easy fiscal and easy monetary policy is a persistently large current account deficit, a falling lira, and very high inflation. This extremely unorthodox policy mix has been condemned in international financial policy circles as reckless and harmful to the Turkish economy. Critics point to an increase in dollarization as Turkish households are losing their confidence in the lira, have been moving their money into dollars and euros. Critics also point to an increase in income inequality as the poorer segment of the population is less protected against inflation. These criticisms are all true, but there's also a positive flip side that does not get enough attention or credit. One, high inflation and low interest rates meant that Ankara has been able to quickly inflate away its debt. Turkey is one of the few countries in the world that has seen a decline in its public debt to GDP ratio since the global financial crisis. Currently at just 40%, it is one of the lowest in the world. Two, the Turkish lira has fallen more than inflation has gone up. As a result, Turkey has experienced a sharp depreciation of its exchange rate. Indeed, the lira has not been cheaper since the mid-1990s. This is giving a boost to Turkish exports, especially the tourism sector. The number of foreigners visiting Turkey in the first quarter of this year grew 30% compared with 2022. Yes, Erdogan's macro policy experiment is risky. It unleashed the genie of destabilizing inflation that may be difficult to put back into the bottle later. Yet the economy grew 11% in 2021 and another 5% in 2022. More importantly, the Turkish government is relatively debt-free, and the economy has achieved a big boost in its international competitiveness. If the next government, whoever wins the election, can quickly move to re-establish policy credibility, this could provide a foundation for strong economic performance. Presently, it looks like Erdogan will go on to win the runoff on May 28th. It is reasonable to assume that the votes of Sinan Ogan, a nationalist who received 5% in the first round, will go to Erdogan in the second round. A survey of voter intention conducted this week by Rewe, a Canadian online survey technology firm, also shows that Erdogan is likely to win. A victory for Erdogan will be a loss for the unipolar world and a win for the multipolar world order. Why? One, Turkey is getting closer to Russia. Even though Turkey is a member of NATO, it declined to join the Western sanctions against Russia. Last year, trade between Turkey and Russia increased to $70 billion as Turkey stepped up its purchases of Russian oil and gas. Russians opened more than 1,000 new companies in Turkey last year, and Turkey granted more than 150,000 residency permits to Russians. Two, Turkey is repairing relations with neighboring countries that are not on good terms with Washington. Earlier this month, Russia hosted talks between Syria and Turkey that marked the highest level of contact between Ankara and Damascus since the start of the Syrian civil war over a decade ago. The normalization of relations between Turkey and Syria will remove a major flashpoint in the Middle East and weaken the leverage of the United States. Turkey's historic support for the Iranian nuclear program has been a source of enmity between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Following the murder by Saudi agents of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018, the relationship between Turkey and Saudi Arabia became all but severed. However, after Erdogan's visit to Riyadh in 2022, the relationship between Turkey and Saudi Arabia has improved. In March this year, the Saudis deposited $5 billion in the Turkish central bank as a demonstration of its support for Turkey's struggling economy and Erdogan in the election. The continued reconciliation between the two Sunni powers, especially following the peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia brokered by China earlier this year, will further reduce the influence of the United States in the Middle East. 3, meanwhile, Turkey is looking eastward for growth. Turkey is a dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization led by China and Russia. Turkey is an active member of China's Belt and Road Initiative program, having received more than $4 billion of loans from Beijing to build out high-speed rail network, 5G telecommunication, and modernize its energy infrastructure. Meanwhile, China's exports to Turkey are also surging as Turkey has become the transfer point for goods destined for Russia's Black Sea ports. At the last election rally before the first round vote, Erdogan accused the opposition of working with the US President Joe Biden to topple him. Whether the allegation is true or not, it is very clear which candidate Biden is rooting for in this election. For the same reason, it is also clear which candidate Putin, Xi Jinping, and Mohammed bin Salman are rooting for. This election is important because it will more than move the needle in the intensifying battle between the unipolar and the multipolar world. There's a lot at stake here.
If you got something out of this program, please hit like and subscribe to my free YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about my investment strategy, come visit us at davidwuunbound.com.
Thank you for listening.